I feel when it comes to it all, it's easy for people to look in from the outside. But when you put it all together.
Sorry I'm late, I just don't give a fuck! It's the N-O-T-O-R-R-O!
Not just the weigh-ins, not just the fight, all of the other stuff.
You're damn right the C in the UFC stands for Conor.
28 years of age, I'm getting fight checks and promoter checks. As far as the fight, he will be unconscious inside 4 rounds. Surprise, surprise, motherfucker! Conor McGregor!
July 14th, 1988. Conor McGregor is born. A little baby Conor McGregor, to be exact. And he come out of his mother with clenched fists, according to his dad, who said he'd always been a fighter. His mum wasn't able to see that, she was a bit busy at the time. But he was born and raised in Crumlin, which is sort of known for being a bit of a rough city, but the locals say it's fine, don't worry about it. As a kid, Conor seemed like any other Irish lad, you know, loved football, supported Man United. But when he turned 12, that was where his love of fighting started. That was when young Conor would walk into Crumlin Boxing Club. And this is where he would meet a man called Phil Sutcliffe. Now Phil would later become his boxing coach, and he was the one who taught Conor how to switch stances and a lot of the skills that would eventually make Conor a nightmare for everyone. But unfortunately for Conor, at 17, his family would move to Luton, which was considered to be a more desirable area. But for him, that meant leaving the gym, and with that, all of his friends. Now, many people know Conor's dad in MMA. Tony is a charismatic dude. He is a sharp dresser. But what they might not know is back in the day, he was a hard-working man. I mean, he was taxi driving, he was a hospital orderly, and he encouraged Conor to go and get himself an honest job. Conor ended up in a plumbing apprenticeship, which meant every morning he'd be waiting by the side of the motorway to get picked up, taken to site and installing pipes.
We drive 2 hours in the traffic all the way to the site, and it was just a rough time for me, and I knew that I did not want to pursue this life. So I left and I quit, and I went home and I told my father, I said, there's not a hope in hell you're going to ever get me back on that building site again.
And it got to the point where his dad goes up the stairs, he's throwing money at him, please go do your apprenticeship, go to college, and I'll give you 10 grand. He offered him 10 grand to do it. He turns his quilt over, nah dad, I'm not going, it's not for me. It's rumoured at that point, Tony McGregor got pretty angry.
And he essentially said, we'll see about that, and we had many, many fights. Although I may have lost the fights we had, but essentially I won because I did not go back to the building site.
Now, as you can imagine, Conor was pretty disillusioned. I mean, we know the man now, he wasn't going to settle for that lifestyle, let's be honest. So he really needed someone to turn to, and the man he turned to was John Kavanagh. Now, we first met John at 15 years old when he walked into his gym, and Paddy Houlihan said he rocked up with a crazy haircut, boxer shorts on, and a boxer's angry face. He wasn't there to become part of the family, he wanted to compete. He wanted to fight. With a bit of sparring and a bit of grinding from John Kavanagh, they worked up an understanding that they could really help each other a lot. The more Conor went to the gym and learned MMA, the more he wanted to go. Whereas it was the exact opposite with work. I mean, he had no interest in becoming a plumber at all. Conor then threw himself completely into the sport of MMA. He had his first fight. I mean, he rocked up in beach shorts, but he still beat the living hell out of the other guy. And the power is clear as day to see in that first video. Second fight, the confidence is coming now. The movement is coming. He is growing as a fighter every day. He meets his idol, Chuck Liddell, at UFC 85 in London. Things could be going better from a career standpoint, but behind the scenes, it's still not looking good. In his next fight, Conor would lose by submission, which definitely brought him down a peg or two. Then things went from bad to worse. Conor took some tickets that were set aside for John Kavanagh, sold them, spent the money on himself, which basically meant he was stealing from his own coach. It came out, Conor wouldn't even face John Kavanagh. He was so ashamed of what he'd done, he'd barely get out of bed. The only way this relationship was repaired was by Conor's mum going and begging John Kavanagh, please give him another chance. And that's what got Conor back in the game. Now, we've all seen the relationship John and Conor have. I mean, they're like brothers, you know, but it feels like this point in their relationship was the turning point after reading this quote which says, his mother was worried. Her name was Margaret, my mother's Margaret too. And it was one of the first times, maybe the first time, that a parent had reached out to me. It got me thinking, maybe I've got a bigger role here than punching and kicking. Maybe I'm doing a bit more for them than I thought. And I guess I started to realise that a lot of people get into fighting for the same reasons I did. It's not for the fighting, they are dealing with something in their childhood. Conor pissed John off, so John just pinned him down, pummeled the fuck out of him, and made him promise he was there to learn to fight and not for street brawl. The fact is, everyone looks at Conor McGregor now as Mr. Success in fighting. He's got so much money, but back then, he was a bum. Like, he couldn't even afford training gear, and he needed someone to partner him on this journey. And they say behind every successful man is an even better woman.
That to me was a special thing to be able to do. My girlfriend worked very, very hard throughout the years coming up and stuck by me when essentially I had absolutely nothing.
She's tall, she's brunette, she's beautiful. She's got like a girl next door face and like a really nice smile. She's got hips on her, but she's slim and she's in great shape. Like, despite Conor being such an outspoken, nasty piece of work at times, she calms him. She's the warmth, the care and the love when he is acting outrageous, you know? She seems like the type of lass who you could be all ready to fight and rip someone's head off and she could just calm you right down. No problem. So the first time he sees her, gets her attention in the nightclub, starts cracking the jokes out, you know, getting her laughing, as you do. She gets home, next morning wakes up, friend request from Conor McGregor. Smooth Conor, real smooth. Before you know it, Dee's moved into the house with Conor's mum and dad and is staying with Conor 24/7. She's helping him with her money from her job. She's looking after him in every way possible. She's taking him to the gym as a taxi service. She's cooking for him, she's cleaning for him. She is his confidant. After Conor battled so long, training hard every day, getting the fucking shit kicked out of him, and then his dad not believing in his dream and feeling like he'd let him down, he finally had someone who was going to support him all the way. And that must have made a massive difference. You know, like, you're sitting to yourself saying, I can be world champion one day, and everyone thinks you're crazy. Now finally someone that you love believes that as well. And they would often speak about this on the car journeys to the gym and speak their future into existence. One day, Dee's not going to have to work and I'm going to be world champion and everything's going to happen just like this. And it did.
I'm a professional MMA fighter with a record of 4-1. I'm an up-and-coming fighter, and without a doubt you will see me on the UFC in the near future, without a doubt.
But it wasn't easy. McGregor went on an absolute tear in Cage Warriors. Knockout after knockout after knockout. People were dropping like flies around this guy. And this culminated in the lightweight title fight against Ivan Boshinga, where he battered him and finished him with a devastating trademark McGregor left hook that left Conor McGregor a two-weight world champion in Cage Warriors and on top of the world, it seemed. But in reality, he still didn't have a lot of money. One of his best mates had been told some very bad medical news after fighting for too long, and the UFC still hadn't called. The dream was still a mile away. Enter Dana White.
Welcome to the UFC, man.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So there's been a lot of hype. I guess the hype is real.
Dana was in Ireland accepting the gold medal of honorary patronage from Trinity College, where everyone he met said, when are you going to sign Conor McGregor? He was like, who? He pretty soon became aware of who Conor McGregor was, got the meeting together, and not long after that meeting, he calls Lorenzo Batista and says, look, I don't know if this kid can fight, but if he can, we've got a bona fide star on my hands with this lad. So after sitting on the dole for a few months and feeling like shit about himself, because no one feels good on the dole, except me uncle, because he's a lazy bastard, Conor McGregor was finally going to make his way into the UFC against Marcus Brimage, who was known to bang and going to try and take his fucking head off. Conor gets in there and we see movement like we've never seen in the UFC. We've seen good strikers before, but the angles that he's coming in at and the uppercuts and the shots he was throwing, we'd not seen that style before. And Marcus Brimage was in way over his head. And Marcus Brimage was good, but McGregor he looked like Neo from the Matrix in there. He couldn't be touched and he just smashed this lad to bits and announced himself on the world stage in his first fight. He got knocked out of the night and he instantly connected with the crowd, which is something no one has done better than him. When he shouted at Dana White, 60 G's, baby, and that's what he wanted and that's what he got from Dana. He instantly had control over Dana, over the UFC, over the crowd, and over the fight. And he's never stopped doing that from that first fight. Next up, it was Max Holloway, who's gone on to become a world champion, but this fight came way too soon in his career for him. Conor was on a level above in every single facet of MMA. He controlled and dominated this fight, even with an injury. The problem is we didn't realise how big of an injury it was. And after the fight, it came out that Conor had ruptured his ACL, which brought his UFC dream to a grinding halt. I remember that time in the UFC vividly, because the UFC had been putting so much energy behind this kid, and all of a sudden he's gone, and we don't know if he's coming back. We don't know if he's going to be as good as he was when he comes back. But by all accounts from the doctors, he competed obsessively with George St. Pierre on his recovery, because George St. Pierre had the exact same injury, and every day it's, what did George do? How did George do this? Did George do that this quickly? He wanted to beat George back to the octagon. Even when he was recovering from an injury, it was all a competition. And when he did come back, he came back with a vengeance. In his comeback fight, Conor was matched up against a hard Brazilian bastard in Diego Brandão. He was a man no one wanted to fight. He looked evil on The Ultimate Fighter. Then they put it in Dublin, Ireland, just to ramp the pressure up more. It's in his own backyard. So that's the first time in a main event on the UFC. Diego Brandão staring across the cage from him in his own backyard. And it's his comeback fight where he has to remind everyone who he is. He doesn't want anyone to forget. Conor McGregor is the rising star in the UFC, and how does he deal with all that pressure? He runs across the cage and beats the fucking shit out of him. He makes him look like an amateur, and he lets the whole world know, we're not here to take part, we're here to take over. Next up, it's a tough motherfucker in Dustin Poirier, and we've only really realised how good this kid is since that fight, because everyone else has had their absolute hands full with him. But before the fight, Conor is baiting him, winding him up, getting him over emotional, making him want to run and take Conor's head off, because when he does that, he forgets the game plan, he forgets the technique.
Coming up against me, that's not going to be good. You know, I'm going to crack him with a jab and he's going to wobble and I'm going to put him away early. It's going to be a first round KO, mark my words.
And it works a charm. Conor predicts a first round knockout, which seemed a little bit unrealistic at the time, but Poirier walks onto every big shot because Conor is in his head. We're seeing for the first time really the mind games of Conor McGregor. He lands the big shot just as he predicted, finishes Dustin Poirier in the first round, and this was the fight that earned Conor the nickname Mystic Mac.
So I said I'd knock him out in the first round, and I knocked him out in the first round. You can call me Mystic Mac because I predict these things.
Now was the chance for Conor to seize his title shot. All he had to do was beat Dennis Siver, which seemed like an easy matchup on paper. I mean, the bloke is nowhere near the size of McGregor, and McGregor made easy work of him. The most entertaining thing about the fight came after it, when Conor jumped the cage, stares right in the face of Jose Aldo in the crowd and screams into his face. He lets him know right there and then there is no fear. And that was the first time we'd ever seen anyone act like that towards Jose Aldo. Aldo was undefeated for 10 years. He was feared by everyone. No one wanted to fight Jose Aldo. And Conor made a massive statement there and saying, I'm coming for you. Spit shine that fucking belt, pal. The mind games Conor played in the run-up to that fight took a massive toll on Jose, and it literally started the second he finished fighting Dennis Siver. That really shows what a genius and a master tactician McGregor could be in the art of fighting. So Dana makes the fight. Jose Aldo, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, Muay Thai specialist, an absolute animal, undefeated for 10 years against a wild man from Ireland who can't stop knocking people out. They went on a world tour where Conor relentlessly pushed him, shoved him, touched him, ripped his belt off of him, did everything he could to get into that man's mind, and it seemed like it worked, because not long before the fight was meant to happen, Aldo pulls out with an injury. Now that injury was a pretty bad injury, but Conor had worse injuries at the time. His ACL was knocked again, and it really seemed like Conor had finally gotten into his head just where he wanted to. In steps Chad Mendes on a matter of days' notice, a wrestling specialist, a style that Conor had supposedly been protected from the whole entire time, had now been given a chance against Conor, while Conor had a knee injury, which is the worst kind of injury you can have in trying to stop a takedown. So we were going to see finally how Conor does against a wrestler. That fight for me was possibly one of my most memorable as a McGregor fan, because he was such an underdog. You know, now everyone looks at him as this big wealth machine, but In this fight, he'd never won a title. You know, can he do it? Can this kid from Ireland, the ultimate underdog, finally pull off the upset? Can he beat a wrestler who he's being protected against? And he tries to get into Chad Mendes' mind. He's saying, who's going to take the first step back? It'll not be me. Let's go and meet in the middle. Let's fight it out. And Mendes is obviously going to wrestle. He's trying to get him not to. He goes straight at him, flying kicks. Mendes takes him down. And he spends a lot of that first 2 rounds on his back, trying to get up. But as he promised before the fight, he used elbows. He is hammering Chad Mendes from the bottom. When he gets up, he is picking a shot. He is stabbing him with kicks to the belly, trying to get the energy out of Mendes because he hadn't had as long a camp as McGregor. And when he finally weathers the storm, he gets up at the end of the second round. He promised Dana White, I'm going to end this in the second round. And he marches forward. Mendes tries to take him down again, but he can't this time. Mendes is tired. It's all paying off for Conor. Stabbing kicks, punches. He won't be stopped. Left, right, left, and a massive overhand left. Drops Chad Mendes. He's on the floor. Conor's covered in blood. He's belting him. It's all over. The new UFC featherweight champion, Conor McGregor, he's on top of the cage with John Kavanagh. The journey, all that friendship, all that training, all that respect that they have has finally culminated in World Championship gold. They've done it. Conor drops to his knees, and you can see he is physically, emotionally, absolutely exhausted. Like, he's given his whole life for this moment, and it's finally here. Everyone who loves him's around him. All his training partners, his family, his coach, they're all celebrating because he's world champion. And the Irish people have invaded that part of the world, and they've turned that whole part of Vegas Irish for one night only. It was a dream come true. The problem is, the dream wasn't fully realised because he's not actually world champion. He's the interim champion. And Jose Aldo is still officially the world champion. So he knows he's got to go after him next. Jose Aldo is the pound for pound king. Everyone rates him as the best fighter at any weight class, but McGregor does seem to be under his skin. And as the weeks build up to this fight, he ramps the pressure back up on him. He is calling him every name, trying to get into his skin. To make him over emotional, he even admits it right before the fight. He's like, I just want him to overcommit, leave himself in the dead space, and I will be there setting traps left, right and centre, and he will realise he is in trouble. By then, it is too late. And he says it exactly like that. Even on the walk-ins, you can see the difference in attitude. McGregor doesn't look like he's in a world title fight. He looks like he's going to walk the dog down the beach. Aldo looks like he's about to get executed for crimes he did 10 years ago. You know what I mean? He's literally just like walking towards like that. It looks bad. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't look confident. But Aldo's known to not be the most braggadocious guy walking into the fight. So you sort of think, oh, well, that doesn't maybe mean anything. They go to touch gloves. They don't touch gloves. There's bad blood there. But even then, there's no eye contact. McGregor's looking him dead in the eye, but Aldo is looking at the ground. He has no interest in that at all. Right before they fight, McGregor looks across the ring and he says to Aldo, let's go, boy. And the fact that he says that before he's about to fight the most feared fighter in MMA shows he knew what was going to happen. He had spent hours upon hours knowing that he was one day going to fight this guy many years ago, analysing this guy, and knows every weakness he has, and he knows he's going to beat them. Aldo walks out over-aggressive, over-emotional, overextends, and bang, McGregor catches him. It's all over. 13 seconds was all it took, and before we know it, McGregor's on the cage and he's giving it all of that, celebrating, because now he's the undisputed world champion. At that point in MMA, it didn't feel like we had the next big star on our hands. It felt like we had a phenomenon in MMA. The fact that he'd called the first round knockout of a man who'd never been beaten in 10 years, went in and didn't just knock him out in the first round, he knocked him out in the first 15 seconds. I mean, that is insane. The hype train, not only was it was on full steam ahead. Conor McGregor had announced himself as the biggest star in MMA history. And that might have been one of the worst things to happen to Conor. Not to beat Aldo, but to beat him so easily and to have his star take off so much. He went from an MMA star to a superstar, and everyone in the world now knew Conor McGregor, and that definitely went to his head. I mean, you see in the press conferences later on where he's just crazy. Like, it's just no other way to describe it. You know, we've seen him go from joking and knowing that he's joking to like the character just grew. It was almost like The Mask. He put on that mask and boom, he just turned into this monster, you know. And as entertaining as it was, believing your own hype is a dangerous thing. As talented as Conor was, that one-shot kill that he landed on Aldo made him think he could do that to anyone. And one person he couldn't do that to was Nate Diaz.
Fuck that! Conor McGregor, you're taking everything I work for, motherfucker. I'm gonna fight your fucking ass.
Now, the fight against Nate Diaz came about because he was supposed to be fighting Rafael dos Anjos. He pulled out, and last minute, Conor said, fuck it, I'll fight anyone, which you have to respect that. Nate Diaz puts his hand up, and next thing you know, we've got these two going at each other. Now, they're already made perfect match in that they're both aggressive motherfuckers. But because Conor knocked out Jose Aldo as easy as he has, I think he just thought, I'm going to go in there and do the same to Nate Diaz. Aldo is a better fighter than Nate Diaz. Technically, yes, but Aldo's a much smaller man. Nate Diaz is a much bigger man. And he's fucking fit. I mean, he does triathlons, for Christ's sake. This guy can go, and even on short notice, probably is fitter than Conor McGregor. Conor turns up looking like he's about to go to the beach, you know. He's a lot heavier than he usually is, and he's not used to carrying that much size and mass during a fight and managing to go the distance. You know, this was a totally new experience for him, let alone fighting someone who's over 6 foot. He hadn't prepared for this at all, but he's thinking, fuck it, I'm Conor McGregor. I knock people out who have been unbeaten in 10 years in the first round. I can do this. No, you can't. When he went into that fight, his main undoing was he did not take Nate Diaz seriously. He did not realise he was fighting a 6'1" or 6'2" zombie who was going to take your shots and keep moving forward and actually slip a lot of them as well, because that lanky dude is good at using the shoulder roll style. And Conor was really not accurate, not efficient with his energy, and missed a lot of his big chances. And the ones he did land, Diaz just sucked it up and got on with it. And that pressure took its toll, and next thing you know, Conor's breathing heavy. The knockout power is gone. Good night. And Diaz is in his face, punching. Next thing you know, Conor McGregor, the striking expert, is shooting for his life, and Nate Diaz has got him wrapped up like an anaconda on the floor and is choking the fucking life out of him. The hype train, well and truly derailed. This was weirdly one of the most impressive moments in McGregor's career, because after all the shit talking and all the bravado, he'd been humiliated in the middle of the octagon, and you're wondering how he's going to deal with this. Is he going to do a Ronda and hide under a towel and not even be seen leaving the arena? But no. He got up, dusted himself off, and took it like a man and said, look, I've been bested, I'm going to come back, and I want that man at that same weight, no changes again, because I can beat him.
I went in, I took the fight, and it didn't pay off. This is the fight business. It's another day, I'll come back.
And the fact that he was so honest towards himself, it made you realise why he's become such a good fighter, because the only people who improve are the ones who can criticise themselves and become their own biggest critic. And you can really see that in him. He really didn't have a problem with what anyone else said. It was how he felt about himself inside that really mattered. And you knew he was going to go away and train like an absolute motherfucker. And that's exactly what he did. He spent a fortune on his training camp, bringing in lanky boxers with the same stance as Diaz to replicate the style. He really prepared for this next fight, and it was all business now. Now his reputation was on the line, because if he goes and loses to Diaz again, then this invincible, superhuman character that we've all bought into is finished. I mean, he's gatekeeper at that point, because Nate Diaz didn't have an amazing reputation before McGregor got beaten off him anyway. So he had to win this fight to maintain the brand, everything. And he knew he had to bet on himself and bet big. And he did. This was the biggest fight in the UFC so far. Even the music they came out to. Conor had Biggie, Nate had Tupac. They were just the perfect rivalry in every way. In that first round, we seen, when they're fresh, who was the better fighter. McGregor, with a full gas tank, just looked a level above Diaz, clipping him left, right and centre, chopping him down with the leg kicks, dropping him. And in the second round, he dropped Diaz twice. You're wondering, why don't you just go to the ground and finish him? But you don't want to go down there with an octopus like Diaz. He will pull you in and tie you up, and before you know it, you're getting choked out again. So McGregor plays it safe. Towards the end of the second round, we see Diaz getting a bit more energy. You know, McGregor, as he does, 8 minutes, that 8-minute mark, for whatever reason, seems to be a wall that he hits with a gas tank. In the third round, it was all Diaz. And Diaz is piling the pressure on Conor now. The commentators, Joe Rogan, is thinking, it's all Diaz. Diaz has got him in a lot of trouble. McGregor's having to use his shoulders, and the shots are bouncing off him left, right and centre against the cage. We're thinking we're seeing a better version of Conor, but still not good enough to beat Diaz. Diaz looks like he's coming on strong at this point, and that he's going to have the gas tank to finish Conor. But Conor clearly prepared better for this than what people had realised, because in the fourth round, he gets another wind, and all of that cardio training that he'd been doing paid off. He puts the pressure on Diaz. He's outlanding him time and time again, and that puts him 3 rounds to 1. And in the fifth round, Conor coasted that one. No one really asserted their dominance that much, but Diaz did get a takedown, but it was a close round, and Conor did enough to get the win, and he showed really at that point, despite Diaz's size advantage, he is the better fighter. Conor had once again come back from adversity for what feels like the millionth time in this journey, and now he had his sights on that lightweight title. He wanted to be the first UFC fighter ever to hold 2 titles at the same time. No one had ever done that before. And standing in his way was Eddie Alvarez. Now, they call Eddie Alvarez the underground king for a reason. He is a fighter's fighter. He's got the respect of everyone. He is a hard man, but he can do everything in MMA to a good standard. You're not going to walk through Eddie Alvarez with ease. Or so we thought, but Conor did it. Again, just when you think he can't outdo himself, he goes in there and he makes Eddie Alvarez look like a fucking child. I mean, I don't even know how to say, I'm a big fan of Eddie Alvarez, but he did. He went in there, and it was possibly the biggest, well, it was the biggest fight of his life. That was the biggest UFC history moment we've probably ever seen. And he made him look like a fucking kid. Eddie takes a shot well, but when Conor landed that punch, the first punch he landed, you seen a look on Eddie Alvarez's face like, what the fuck was that? That is not what, I've never had anything like that in my life. You could tell, and it just landed over and over and over again. And before we knew it, Alvarez had been down like 3 times. When Alvarez went for the shot and tried for the takedown and he failed, I was watching it live, and even at that point I was like, this is over. You know, your only fucking hope was to fucking land that takedown, mate. If you can't do that, good night. It felt like a matter of time, and it was a case of when and how is Conor going to end this, not if. And this 4-punch combo that he landed, we don't see shit like this in the UFC. This was high-level boxing, and Eddie Alvarez's head is like fucking pinball machine here, mate. He's all over this shot, listen. Drops him, it's all over. The first time the UFC had ever been in New York, and we've got Conor McGregor, just as he predicted, holding 2 titles at one time. Mystic Mac makes MMA history. But if there's one thing we've learned about this bloke, is that it's never enough. Nothing is ever enough. 1 belt in Cage Warriors wasn't enough, he needed 2. Being in Cage Warriors wasn't enough, he needed to be in the UFC. Being UFC champion wasn't enough, he wanted 2 belts. Now, belts aren't enough. Being MMA superstar of all time isn't enough. He wants to fight the biggest star in combat sports history. Floyd Money Mayweather.
There's no other way about it. His little legs, his little core. I'm gonna knock him out inside 4 rounds, mark my words.
All work is what? Well, point to the easy work then.
And he thinks he can beat him in his own game. A game Mayweather has studied for decades upon decades, and Conor's just going to walk right in, beat him in his first match. He's never even boxed. I mean, he's boxed in a cage, but boxing in a cage when you're defending a takedown with 4-ounce gloves are nothing like wearing the gloves that they have and beating someone who has spent a lifetime in practicing how to block punches. So every boxing expert, McGregor is in way over his head, even the most MMA fans. But every time we've doubted him, he's always proven wrong. And there's a part of you that no matter how unrealistic it seems, can't help but believe he might have a fucking chance here. He might just connect and boom, maybe it's someone who isn't a boxer who's going to be the antidote for Floyd Mayweather. He won't see it coming, it'll be a weird wild shot out of nowhere, and that's it. And the whole world buys into this fight. It's superstar versus superstar, the best in boxing versus the best in MMA, the 2 biggest shit talkers in history, and they're all about the money, and they're gonna make a fuck ton off of this fight.
If you're asking would I like to fight Floyd, I mean, who would not like to dance around the ring for $180 million?
Yeah. I'll be honest, before the fight, I said like an 8th round stoppage to Floyd Mayweather. It's the only way I can see it happening. He's going to defend McGregor, we're going to see McGregor tire, and then Mayweather's going to have open season on Conor. And that's pretty much how it went. But the closer the fight got, the more you just start to believe. And before I know it, I'm putting hundreds of pounds down on McGregor to win by knockout. For fuck's sake. I can't believe I did that. Those press conferences were probably the most memorable thing about that fight. I mean, they were epic. Conor kind of got ambushed on the first one. He had no idea that it wasn't like an MMA press conference where people ask questions and you answer them. He was there on the podium just fucking rambling, do you know what I mean? But he did speak very confidently and said, I'm going to knock him out inside the first 4 rounds. This is an old man. He hasn't got what it takes to handle my power. And that, you know, you're starting to believe that. I mean, he is an older man, you know. How can he stand the power of Conor? And then when they face off, McGregor really starts trying to get into his head then. He's like, you're lucky this isn't a real fight. You'd be dead already. Are your little old hands hurting these days? You got brittle bones, have you? You just start believing, yeah, he's going to drag him into a real fight. Yeah, he's going to make him fight him and Conor's going to catch him. In the second press conference, Conor brought his fucking A.
I want this entire arena to scream, F the Mayweathers. 1, 2, 3, F the Mayweathers.
That's what I remember from that fucking press conference. It was unbelievable. Floyd turns up with a tracksuit on and like a Louis Vuitton bag, and McGregor's like, what, you got a school bag on stage?
You can't even read.
This was like a stand-up comedy session, really, more than a press conference. No fighter in the history of the game, even Muhammad Ali, couldn't talk shit like that. That was another level. And at that point, I think everyone was like, when you're watching someone verbally destroy someone else, no matter the skills, the sports, the records, you can't help but think, he must be able to kick his ass. Subliminally, it just sinks into your brain, and he made people buy into this fight, and that was why everyone cared by the time the gloves were on. The problem was, he's not a fucking boxer. You know, he's an MMA fighter. And for all Conor's got some really good natural boxing skills, and he landed, Mayweather played the perfect game plan, as I thought he probably would. Absorbed the energy early on, made sure that all the heaviest shots McGregor was going to throw were bouncing off him, and once McGregor had spent that energy, then Mayweather walked him down. Truthfully, I think if McGregor had actually tried to counter-punch instead of going in there and bully Mayweather, he might have had a much better chance in landing that one shot, despite giving up a lot of rounds. But we'll never know. The bottom line is Mayweather's a better boxer than Conor McGregor. But what McGregor did show that he does deserve credit for, as he got in there with the greatest of all time, all right, a little over the hill, and lasted 10 rounds in his first ever boxing match against Floyd Mayweather. That deserves respect. Even though McGregor lost that fight, his stock didn't drop. Everyone thought, fair play. He got in and he had a go. And he did land some punches early on. But now, everyone wants him back in MMA. And that's proven harder than we thought. We've gone from saying McGregor, month in, month out, always in the media, something's happening, he's fighting soon, to months of nothing. And only lately has he come out of the shadows. After months away from the sport and being stripped of both of his titles, Conor finally showed his face at a UFC event the night before his lightweight title was due to be competed for by Khabib Nurmagomedov. Now, Khabib had recently got into an altercation with his good friend Artem Lobov. Conor took that as a personal insult. He flies over with a mob full of Irish lads and he attacks Khabib's bus, smashing a dolly through the window, injuring UFC fighters, demanding Khabib get off the fucking bus. Khabib doesn't get off the bus. Conor goes on the run and the NYPD end up tracking him down. Conor is charged with 1 count of criminal mischief and 3 counts of assault and is likely to get, at the very least, anger management and a big fine. It could be worse. This is a massive setback to Conor's career because now he's being known for all of the wrong things, you know. Winning fights is what got him the name he's got, not smashing buses up. And when the fame got to him last time, it was the Diaz loss that brought him back down to earth and made him work harder than he ever had before to bring the best out in him. And I hope that this does the same thing, because if it doesn't, we're going to see one of the most talented UFC fighters ever blow it. As it stands, Conor McGregor is on bail until June 14th, 2018. Where does he go from here? Let me know in the comments. There will be more profiles like this coming to the channel, so if you like this, hit the like button, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.